In the castle laboratory, the protagonist was pouring liquid from one flask to another. Cyrus grabbed his hand, warning Sir Reinhardt that they should not be mixed, and he asked in confusion what she was talking about. An explosion thundered over the castle, and the elf screamed that the king himself could see that it was exploding, and asked who would mix fire flowers with stone seeds. But the man looked at his beloved in confusion, asking for forgiveness. That it seemed he was simply distracted by something, and she was indignant that yesterday he said the same thing, and it once again ended in an explosion. Wiping the old man's face with a handkerchief, the elf mentally wondered why he was so cute, even at such a mature age. And out loud, she asked him not to move. His whole face was dirty. Looking tenderly at his beloved, the king asked how long she would call him Sir Reinhardt. Asked her to call him as usual, and she said that she could not. The girl looked down with a sad smile, who asked her about reasons. The palace was engulfed in flames. The king went out onto the balcony. Behind him, his loyal comrades knelt. The orc bowed his head and said that he had come to greet his lord for the last time. Turning around, the old men called their names and asked what was wrong with their faces, as if they had seen someone on the brink of a grave for the first time. Looking again at the burning castle, the man assumed that in total million soldiers had gathered from all over the continent to crush Thiedman King, the scourge of humanity. Perhaps all of humanity's fighting power had accumulated here. The crowd of soldiers moved forward, and the king asked how they would deal with the consequences. Their countries were completely incapacitated, and all for the sake of one fight. To which the orc explained to his lord that the enemies did not even allow themselves to think about accepting our right to exist. Looking darkly at the ruler, the warrior asked if he wanted to go with them. But old man replied that that was the point, that they could only leave because he would stay here. The wind ruffled the man's hair, and he asked Adolphus to accept his apology, even with the divine guarantee he had lost everything. To which the dwarf reminded him that it was not a guarantee, but a prophecy, but the hero called it the same thing. Keep the elf close by Willith the orc paves the way. The one who can pass the Diamond Man abyss and tear down the Horko pillar will soon appear. So follow him. He will change your fate and grant you salvation. The king closed his eyes and remembered that he was very suppressed. He had only destroyed some shrine, and the dwarves suddenly proclaimed him a savior. He did not understand what was happening at all. The protagonist took a few steps along the balcony, and the old man expressed hope that the day would come and they would meet again. Alpa would give, he replied, that he hoped for it too, wished them a safe journey, and asked them Totri to survive. Cirrus turned around and the man reminded her that it was time for her to go too, and she said that she would wait for Mr. Reifenhardt. Looking at his beloved, the king said that no one knew what fate had prepared for him if something happened to him. He hoped that she would be able to find a worthy partner, but she objected that, as Shay had said, she would wait for him. The old man's gaze became confused. He tried to remind her of the situation, but the elf shouted that she would wait for him. A surprised look crossed with a determined one. The lovers embraced. In the present, Cirrus fought with all her might, until the slave trader honestly admitted that he was ashamed to show her to customers. She was completely luntable, a defective product. She had already been returned 3 times. The elf parried the blow of 2 blades at once, while the seller continued that she was skilled, but her character was so terrible that there was simply no demand for her. She was so difficult to sell that he began to use her to train other elves. After all, they had to experience real combat before becoming full-fledged killers. The man looked at the protagonist and clarified whether he was still interested in buying, and he confirmed this. Rubbing his palms, the merchant concluded that the guy definitely had perverted tastes and decided to demand 100 more. Perverts are always on their own. Wavend said out loud that the buyer would owe gold. Sillin looked at the man in surprise and noted that was very cheap, to which he repeated that the product was defective and admitted that he was not sure he should sell it. The elf looked at Reifenhardt and asked if he was the new master. Frowning, the young man tried to mentally understand how much this girl had suffered that she had so many scars. The hero took off his jacket, and the slave trader offered to call a priest to mend her wounds, but he replied that it was not necessary and asked his companion to help, throwing the jacket over the girl's shoulders. The warrior asked her to put this on for now, since it was get cold outside, and asked if she had a name. She answered that she did not. Wrapping a scarf around the elf's neck, the guy suggested the name Cirrus, heard in response that she understood, and when asked if she liked her, she simply stated that she would remember. The young man buttoned the slave's jacket, and said that from now on her full name was Cyrus Valencia. She reminded him that a slave was not given a last name, and asked if it was his last name, and he replied that no, it was her personal last name, and it was not worth forgetting it. With a smile, Riffenhart gave his name and introduced his companion. Raising an eyebrow, the elf again replied that she understood. The same day, the slave trader looked at Theklian in shock and replied that if he was talking about number, then it had already been purchased. Trick's face turned gray with anger when the man added that it had been sold about an hour ago. Frowning with displeasure, the fat man assumed that it was Beret Horialize that he was planning to buy the elf back. The merchant threw up his hands and said that it was not so. Thebir was a young man he had never seen before, and when asked his name, he replied that he had paid in cash, so he did not ask. With his hands on his hips, the head of the trade association asked, who would carry so much cash to afford an elf slave? And the man explained that it was not as if the price for the elf was standard. After all, it was a low-quality product. The slaver remembered the face of the client when the fat man asked for a description of him, and said that he was a young man of strong build. One could immediately understand how he would see him. At this time, the newly made Cirrus looked at her new outfit in surprise. Rubbing his chin, Riefenhart decided to make do with this for now, and a little later, fueled by her better equipment. On the street, the protagonist turned to the girl and asked if she wanted to eat, and she replied that she would follow the will of the master. He added that she could not call him master, to which he heard the question of whether he would her back. The elf looked at the new master in confusion, and when he objected that he did not mean this, she had thought about what was happening with this man. First, he wrapped her in a cloak, then bought her good clothes, treated her like an ordinary human. Girl. Smiling at his interlocutor. The warrior explained that he wanted to say that she could treat him as a comrade with whom they traveled together. No need to call him master, better by name. Frowning, the elf mentally decided that these were such role-playing in games. Apparently, this pervert, just like the role of an adventurer, continuing to move after the new master, the girl mentally added Thathis' favorite type of game was to save the beauty like a hero, and out loud agreed to call him Rife. Eating a large portion with appetite, the girl thought that all people were the same. Putting down his fork, the young man said that he heard rumors that Rodante's Grace was the most popular restaurant in Zeppelin. They used the name of the goddess, known as the patroness of a bountiful harvest who gave food. One could say that they had communion with the flock. Taking a bite of a bun, Silene clarified, didn't communion imply free food? And the hero asked him to stop, as if the cult of finance did not make money on beauty services. Raising an eyebrow, the boy noted that, of course, she was the goddess of love and beauty. This did not contradict the canons of his religion. The warrior said that he heard that one service costs a heap of gold, and he was forced to admit that this was true. But when Saren suddenly grabbed the lobster stale with her hand, the saint fell silent. The elf froze when she saw their looks, after which she grabbed a fork, realizing that she had forgotten herself. The young man looked at her thoughtfully, not understanding why she didn't like it. He had brought her here to honor the memory of their first anniversary. The girl wiped her mouth with a napkin, and the warrior thought that then he had appeared before her as a savior, and now she saw him as a customer. The first meeting was capable of causing completely opposite impressions. Maybe he should have come later. After some time, walking through Bizarro, continuing to think that sooner or later, his beloved would understand the meaning of his words. Anthus suited him. The merchant presented his goods, and said that they were the best in his store. They would not find anything like this anywhere else. And Riefenhart asked the elf how she was, and whether there was anything useful. The girl took the rapier, and the hero was surprised by the choice. Didn't she usually use a saber? The warrior turned around, abruptly, not understanding how the man knew. But the boy noted that it was true that martial artists could tell who was using what weapon just by looking at their hands. Soon, a saber was hanging from the girl's belt. and the saint remarked that he never thought he would ever have the Mithra-based weapon he had dreamed of. The boy showed off his new dagger, and the boy Iskedwi, a priest, needed a weapon at all. Suddenly, something caught Reifenhardt's attention. He saw people he didn't know moving toward them. One of the men stepped forward and asked if he could have a word with the protagonist. The boy frowned. He asked what was going on. With a calm face, the stranger said that a famous aristocrat wanted to get this elf. The girl glanced at him, looking menacingly at the interlocutor. The protagonist asked, "So what?" Bowing, holding out the letter, the man explained that the buyer was ready to offer a reasonable price for the slave. If desired, they could replace her with another of higher quality, and asked to read it. Towering over the messenger, the guy replied that he was not interested. He clarified whether to take this as a refusal, and heard confirmation. Frowning, the man assumed that the warrior did not understand. He said that his master offered you a reasonable price. Beginning to get angry, the hero objected that he did not understand and repeated that he was not interested. Turning around, the messenger concluded that the interlocutor was stubborn, and in this case, he left him no choice, assuming that he was attracted to this elf. The young man put his hands on his hips and wondered out loud what business it was of this man. But the young priest found him funny. That same evening, in the mention of the head of the trade guild, TK frowned and asked why his subordinate had returned empty-handed. Bowing, Lemon explained that a fool would not sell her regardless of the price. He had very naive ideas about this world. To which Fat Man barked that he should have just smeared it and sprinkled coins on top, to which he objected that there were too many eyes there, and decided it was better to adhere to the norms of decency. Grinning, Ramon said that he wanted to wait for the Reichens to steal this elf, and then they would say that she was dead, and offered double the price. This slave was selling for a pittance anyway, so it would be keep. With a satisfied smile, the head of the trading association admitted that it was tempting and allowed him to take Sir Lantis with him. He was hanging around, doing nothing anyway. It was time to start earning his bread. The next morning at the inn, a scattering of gold coins lay on the bed. Folding his arms over his chest, Reifenhardt reflected that he had stocked up on gold pieces, which seemed like more money than he thought, though it was not much considering his plan to found a new empire. Looking at the coins, he figured that it would be worthwhile to try investing them instead of carrying all this weight around for nothing. Visualizing a map of the surrounding lands in his mind, Harry remembered that a famine would break out in the Kingdom of Croins in the near future. A landowner country where, thanks to the fertile soil and bountiful harvest bestowed by the Earth Goddess Rena, they had never stocked up for famine. Rubbing his chin, the young man mentally added that next spring the famine would bring a wave of deaths and horrific images of parents eating their own children. Folding into grain now seemed a wise choice. Frowning, the warrior thought about the first trading unions that came to mind were Raw Fine, Carrion, and Tan. First of all, he was not going to invest in the first one no matter what, because its founder was Aperverd, who had bullied Cirrus in his past life. If he had to choose between the other two, he would give preference to the third largest union, which specialized in grain sales, and was Rein's main competitor, the Tane Trading Union. Civil rubbed the back of his head, muttering about the damn Ralline, which decided to sell millet at half-price. He did not care about the generally accepted norms at all, and he was still the second largest trading union on the continent. At this rate, they themselves would lose all their partners. It was necessary to consider all incoming offers for exchange as soon as possible in order to resolve the situation. At that moment, one of the employees entered the office and informed the head of the association that he had a visitor who said he wanted to make an investment, and he replied that a small amount of money would not solve their problems now. It would only add to the hassle, and asked to send him away. The man's face expressed shock when he was told that the client was offering 1,500 gold. Reifenhardt, smiling contentedly, said that he wanted to invest his money in grain. Folding his arms across his chest, he asked his interlocutor to fill his warehouses in the Kingdom of Croins for the barley harvest next spring, and then asked again about the kingdom. Looking at the young man with a puzzled expression, the head of the association reminded him that selling grain to Croven was like trying to sell soap to an orc, to which he replied that even an orc would wash himself as soon as he got used to it. And when asked what he was talking about, he replied then nothing. The man looked at the client with irritation when he said that in any case it would be his problem and they would make a profit no matter what. So why not? He replied that he did not dare to offer clients to invest in a knowingly failing business. He offered to look at other offers. Squinting, the guy threatened that if the head did not want to do this, he would just go and invest in another trade union, and he asked him to stop. Looking at the bags of gold and confusion, the man admitted that his business was going through hard times now. But with this investment, they would easily survive and even succeed. He just wanted to offer a more profitable investment. Frowning, the hero remembered that this man had been adamant in his past life too, and said out loud that it was his money so he would decide where to invest it himself. Just let him draw up a contract and be quick about it. Approaching the interlocutor's face, the guy asked to tell him only one thing: not to use his contribution for personal purposes, and he frighteningly muttered that, of course. When one of the employees brought the papers, the warrior asked again if there was a branch of the Tan Trading Association in the Kingdom of Graham, and the head replied that yes, they were just building a trade route to the northern regions. Folding his arms across his chest, the young man asked if there was a branch near the Delia Magic Tower, and hearing in response that no, but the route to the Ronto branch passed through Delphia, asked to get some information for him. The hero looked away when he was asked what exactly and the head of the association would look. Since contacting the branch was not a problem, he mentally decided to take the opportunity to find out what was going on with his body. At this time, Surinth's company of Sun was training in the courtyard of the inn. She made a decisive swing with her dagger and then again and again under the surprised gaze of the boy. The elf moved easily and freely. The girl remembered her mother's face, who told her that high elves were originally imprisoned to be guardians of the forest. The woman stroked her daughter's head, continuing that they lived in eternal grace under the protection of the world tree of Elfenheim. Every living creature, waste-hire, friend, and the trees provided them with food. And although people oppressed them, put them in a miserable position, one day, Alita would show them all the way to paradise. The elven city was engulfed in flames, and the mother kept saying that they were all heirs of the great fairy and asked her beloved daughter to never forget her pride. The little girl looked at the fire in horror. An elf, in a peasant dress, told the future Surin that she would soon go to a better place because she was pretty. From now on, she had to learn to be loyal and polite, as a good elf should. A fat man beat the girl with a club. She sat in a cold basement. Looking ahead, the little elf realized that even her own kind mocked her. Her purebird heritage only gave them more reasons to mock her. Only the sword saved her these days. Continuing her training, the girl remembered that all the adults she knew wielded a sword. They fought bravely and died with honor. That's why she loved this weapon so much. Swinging the sword, she recalled the image of her parents, who fought fiercely for their lives. Saren longed forward. Tears welled up in her eyes because time passed and the memories faded. But she forever kept this phrase deep in her heart: my beloved daughter, never forget about pride. At that moment, applause rang out. Beaming with delight, Silan admitted that it was cool and could not understand how she moved like that. The elf looked at Thebu in surprise and replied that she just needed to try her best. To which he said that she had exactly the same instructions from the Rafini. We're all warriors like that. But she didn't think so. Making lunges with his fists, he asked him piously if he was doing the right thing. And then he turned around when he heard a strange voice saying, "Here she is."